When I was consulting with clients, I spent many hours poring through the followers of a company page, never found clients in there, never found prospects in there, never found people that had attended a trade show listing in there. It was employees, ex-employees, competitors, journalists, students, etc. So my argument from that point of view for several years was, if we don't even know who's following us, and it's quite unlikely for it to be our clients and prospects, we shouldn't be putting our effort there. We put our effort into where people do connect, and that's one-to-one with their contacts. And so that's what it's about, the personal page.
And that's Luan Wise. She's my featured guest on today's episode of the Internal Marketing Podcast. Hi, everybody. I'm Kerry-Ann Stimson, and thank you so much for joining me here again. We're happy to have another conversation here today. And yes, Luan Wise is my featured guest. She is a marketer, an author, and a trainer, and she's going to be sharing with us how you can build a company brand on LinkedIn. So yeah, I think we're all sold. LinkedIn is the place to build your company brand as an awesome social media platform. But guess what? It may not be in the way we probably thought. You know, most of us marketers, we would create our company pages and we spend a lot of time and energy investing in creating awesome content for those company pages. But that's not necessarily the way to do it. And guess what, folks? It comes right back to internal marketing. So we're here to flip the marketing conversation again in this episode, where we're going to be inviting Luan to share with us her awesome insights about how you can build a company brand on LinkedIn. And it may not be the way that you probably otherwise thought. So let's get started. So Luan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to doing this session.
As have I. And so I discovered you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Well, specifically, how I found you on LinkedIn was I was reading a great piece you had written. I believe it was for the Social Media Examiner, where you were talking about how companies, marketers can leverage how their employees use LinkedIn as a platform, particularly where sales and marketing is concerned. Certainly that's what I got from the article. And as an avid LinkedIn user myself, I was really intrigued by it, because when you talk about internal marketing, which is really the focus of this particular podcast, it really comes down to how are companies engaging their employees in a way that encourages and empowers those employees to become advocates of the brand. And LinkedIn is a powerful platform to be able to do that. And I see tons of folks every day on LinkedIn, particularly in the B2B space, who are leveraging their own voices as advocates of the brands that they work for. But I guess maybe we could start off by level setting. If you could share from your perspective, why do you believe LinkedIn generally is a great platform to incorporate in a content marketing strategy today?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there are so many social media platforms, and each has their own benefits and nuances and way they work and the way that people behave on the platforms. But I do love LinkedIn. It was probably the first social media platform I joined. It is actually one of the older social media platforms anyway. You know, it is much older than Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and others. So maybe, you know, that's part of the reason. But also, I think for me, it's because it feels, and it is, very business focused. Whereas Facebook is primarily, or we joined it because of our friends and family. Instagram and Twitter has a bit of a crossover. It can be either. Obviously, you know, all of them do have benefits for business as well. But I think for me, LinkedIn is purely about business conversations and business people. Of course, we all have personalities. We're not robots when we sit at a desk and then turn into someone else when we move away. But I think that's why I like LinkedIn, because it can be that focused.
And that's what I like actually about LinkedIn, how the content that not only I get to share, but what I receive, as you said, it's very, very business focused, industry focused. And I think your response is a great segue into the next question, which is what kind of content works on LinkedIn? Because I find that, again, being a user, when you look at the content, yes, it's very, very business focused, but I guess some will argue that it's real people behind these stories. So how do we incorporate that in there? But I guess generally, in your experience, what kind of content works on a platform like LinkedIn?
And great questions, fantastic questions. But I think before I answer that, I think the important thing is actually for people to define what they mean by works. When people talk about, oh, this works or this doesn't, I will always ask them, what do you mean? What did you set out to do? And I think the real answer to that is, if you know why you're using it and what you want to achieve, then it gives you that focus. For some people, it will be thousands of connections. For some people, it will be thousands of views. For some people, it will be one inquiry that converts into a huge piece of work. So I think it's about knowing what you want to achieve. And then the art of content on LinkedIn or any social media platform is writing and focusing your content to achieve that result, making sure that you show and tell what you do, making sure that you let people know what you do and what you offer, inviting people to have conversations around those topics. But if we were to really break it down, the interesting thing is that even though this is a business platform, if you were to look at what works in terms of what people will engage with, what people will comment on, then actually it's rarely the big business content. It's rarely the, I've written this massive document, blog, article, I've done this big thing today. It tends to be the personal behind the scenes content. My recent one, I appeared in a feature in the national press. I posted a picture of it. Loads of people commented. A couple of years ago, my most popular post in terms of views and engagement was myself and a selfie of an 80-plus-year-old man. But I'll explain the story is that he's a marketing professor who people went, oh, wow, he's still talking. He's written another book. You've been to see him. It was a marketing event. For me, it's more about the storytelling that you do and showing people what you're about and what you're interested in and working on that builds the big picture, rather than doing the, here's a blog, read it. Here's a big thing, read it. Because that's not engaging. People, even though it's a business tool, they want to do business with people. They want to get to know people. So we need to give some personality to it. But of course, then there is still this line of oversharing. Is that too Facebook kind of content? People will say, I think that says more about the people calling it out than the person that writes it in the first place. But I think what works is knowing what you want to achieve and then posting content to help you achieve it. And there's the answer.
I love that. So it's really starts off with the objective, what it is you're trying to shoot for, and ensuring that your content really lines up with that. And I do appreciate the fact that at the heart of it, people want to see people.
Yeah.
Engage with people, with real experiences, real encounters, and as opposed to, as you say, just kind of spitting something out there, here's a great blog post, have a read. It's just flowing nicely how we've been discussing this, because I guess the next question then is that there is a bit of a debate, I found, and I've seen it happen in a few quarters, where you have companies, brands who have their official LinkedIn accounts.
Yeah.
And they post content from those accounts. And then you have the employees or the representatives of those brands, whether it be as high as the CEO or maybe as far as the account executives or members of the sales team even. And there's a question about how brands should be showing up on LinkedIn, because I think companies put their brands there because of whatever their objective is, they put their brand out there, whether it be a part of brand building or lead generation. But we have at the same time, again, those employees who are also posting content. And I've personally found, I don't know what your experience has been, is that the posts from the employees tend to perform better as far as engagement is concerned than from the company accounts. And that's not to say there aren't a handful of companies that are doing very well and getting great engagement, but I've really found that the engagement on the people side with the employees is better than on the company side. But that could be just me. What has been your experience, and what's your position on that debate about, positioning the brand or the employee?
Yeah, this is kind of one of those big myths, and it's something that needs to kind of be busted quite quickly within companies. It's often part of what I do is go in-house and deliver training, and it's always the first question. The marketing central teams think that their LinkedIn activity has to be all about the company page, because to a certain extent they can control this one domain. But actually, you're right. The engagement and activity comes from personal profiles. I think there's a couple of reasons behind this, in that, yes, all businesses, from one person to millions of people, should have a company page presence on LinkedIn. People will search by companies, but also as an individual, you will have your experience section, and that links to a company page. So even me, I'm a business of one, I will have a company page so that it's, there's a presence there, there's a logo that pulls through to my personal profile, but thereafter, I don't actually use my company page. It is set up. From a business point of view, when there is several employees working together, I find that it's useful then for it to be used as a central content marketing hub. I would advise that companies don't sweat the page or building their followers, because actually it takes a lot of effort to build the followers. Only until very, very recently did LinkedIn give you the information of who those followers even were. Many, many years ago, about 4-5 years ago, you had that information. And when I was consulting with clients, I spent many hours pouring through the followers of a company page, never found clients in there, never found prospects in there, never found people that had attended a trade show listing in there. It was employees, ex-employees, competitors, journalists, students, etc. So my argument from that point of view for several years was, if we don't even know who's following us, and it's quite unlikely for it to be our clients and prospects, we shouldn't be putting our effort there. We put our effort into where people do connect, and that's one-to-one with their contacts. And so that's what it's about, the personal page. The challenge is letting employees within an organization know that they need to help the marketing teams and get involved. And it's not a CV. We're not making them redundant if we're asking them to be more active. That it isn't. Sometimes there is that perception that, why am I doing this? Because LinkedIn is just a recruitment place. And it's then having to explain the role of the individuals in the big picture, and for the central, that you can use your company page as a content hub to provide a resource for your employees to be able to stay visible with their network. And that's kind of my long-winded argument around, you need one, but don't sweat it. Focus on the individual.
And that again just drives to the heart of why I believe that an internal marketing conversation is so important, because if you're really on a platform like LinkedIn especially, and I think the same goes even for other platforms as well, because employees are individuals too. They have their own networks, they're building their own personal brands in a lot of instances. So I think in any social type platform, it's really about connecting with people more so than connecting with brands. And what you just shared is very applicable to this sort of discussion about how more companies really need to be tapping in. I personally don't think enough companies are doing that, but that's probably another half of our conversation. But I think the point is taken that you shared, Luan, that we really as brands need to be engaging and empowering our employees to be able to represent the brand on a platform like LinkedIn. And I guess the next question would be, for those companies that aren't doing it, how do you recommend they do that? How practically, what does that look like in a way that they can put their shoulder to the wheel and get going?
I think once you have that understanding, and someone within an organization has that clarity of understanding of how they can use this as a tool, the next bit is obviously then to kind of bring everyone else on board to that level. And sometimes, no, not just sometimes, it has to start at the top and roll down. You can't expect teams to do it if your exec board aren't doing this. So there has to then be a program of getting people involved, upskilling them, taking them through this. The challenge with social media is that it's seen as free. I can download it in 2 seconds, but this is so public and searchable that we need to take a bit more attention of ourselves and how we position ourselves. And I would just say the biggest word, you've already used it a few times, is empowering people within the organization that this is a tool. It doesn't cost us any money, or if we do want to invest in a premium account, it's not a huge investment for the value that it can bring. And actually, we want all of you to help do this. And we're going to train you to do it and give you support to do it.
And when you talk about support, what does that even look like? Because I know a lot of brands are concerned about how much control do we relinquish? I'm going to be giving up control. I'm going to have some employees going rogue. They're not going to be using language that's consistent with the brand. I mean, practically, how do they roll this out? Do they kind of mass produce content and then hand it over to the team and they just click post? Or are they expected to come up with their own content? What have you seen works?
Yeah, I think there's an absolute balance here. I think there's a few things to be taken into consideration. I think it's always important for an organisation to have a social media policy as part of other policies within the organisation. But I actually think for the implementation of the social media policy, it's not just about don't do this, don't do that. You've got to have conversations about what you can do and what good looks like and show examples and have conversations around it. And I've facilitated some wonderful sessions internally where we've almost just looked at what other people are doing or looked at some articles that were in the press and said, would we be okay if we shared this, or would we not be okay if we shared this? So you've almost got to have those conversations. But I find more people are, particularly when they're employees, they don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to be fired. They don't want to be fired for getting it wrong, and therefore they won't do anything at all. So it's about empowering them to do something and then guiding them with best practice on these are the kind of things you could do. And I think it's absolutely fine to, people would love it if content was written for them and created. But for me, that probably would come across as more of the here's a blog, read it stuff. It wouldn't come across as the this is what I've been working on, or here's the event I've been to, or here's a book that I've read that I really enjoyed. Has anyone else read it? And that kind of thing works really well on LinkedIn. So I find that you've got to find your own voice and what people want to hear. And do you know what? There's sometimes just this turning point of someone that does something. And I'm working with a client and he did his first post on LinkedIn 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it made me so happy because he'd followed almost every bit of advice of here's how to open it, here's what to include, this is what your picture should cover. But because he'd followed the think about who it's for, what do I need to tell them, write it as a discussion, include a branded photo, it had over 3,000 views and a stack of comments for his first post. So it's about giving people the do's. And I think that's the important thing. And do you know what? He will post again and again now because he was confident and got some results from it. And it's a bit of an adrenaline rush once that happens.
Especially when you see all that engagement happening, it's wonderful. And I think that's a great example that you shared. And you said confidence booster. I love that because that's absolutely correct. When you're giving something that brings value, because that's really what's supposed to be at the heart of content. It's supposed to be really giving value to your audience, helping them with whatever it is you believe your audience needs a solution to. So we've spoken to the obvious benefits to the company brand of having employees on LinkedIn. So we know there must be a quid pro quo in there somewhere. What are the benefits to the employees? Because, people work for themselves ultimately, I believe, even in as much as they work for a company and they don't want to be fired. At the end of the day, they work for themselves. This is why they do what they do. So in your view, what's the benefit to the employees themselves as individuals being on the platform and engaging and representing their company?
Yeah, this is almost the challenge for individuals as well. So once you can get them to buy in that this is important for the company, they then there's that slight nerve of I'm putting myself out there and I don't feel. Some people are very comfortable with that. Some people aren't quite so comfortable. And for me, I sometimes have to almost explain and go, look, I know there's some CV elements of it on here and that your photo's on here, but actually this is about your role. This is about the finance director of this organization. This isn't about John Smith who went to this school. So if you can explain to them that this is about their job role, and actually people have been looking at their about page on the website for many years. You've been fine going to business meetings and networking meetings and standing in front of people. This is just the virtual way of doing it and building relationships. And actually you can do this easily, low cost, and you're building your own profile, which actually, even though I said this wasn't about recruitment, this is their career presence and it's helping them have a network, get foots indoors, show how credible and experienced they are. And actually what I love about LinkedIn is there's one-man bands, one-women bands, all the way through to, huge corporates. It's a complete level playing field. Doesn't actually matter when we're having conversations human to human. So I think that's, what's in it for the employee. It's about them actually. They matter. They matter to an organization. They matter to themselves. And here is how they can have their voice, and an incredible business tool that helps them to do that.
Absolutely. And that's probably the big win for a lot of folks, is that it's about building your personal brand at the same time you're building the company brand. As I think it's an awesome quid pro quo. So jumping jumping back a bit, I mentioned at the top of the discussion that, an awesome piece that you had written, and you're giving steps about how companies can engage and encourage their employees to build a presence on LinkedIn. I mean, if you could probably kind of just run through maybe your top steps there that companies could take away from this discussion about how they can practically do that.
Yeah, so I had a reread of my own article before this session. But you know what's great about writing? As a practitioner, you do this, and when you write or you have conversations like this, it makes you think, actually, how do I do this? And when you have to explain it to someone else, it actually helps really clarify it in your mind. So I go back to my own content quite a lot because I've already written it. Going back to that company page and someone, whether that's marketing, using that company page as a content hub within the business is great, because when they post content, they do have the ability to notify employees. It's a great piece of functionality that you write the content on your company page, and then there's a big button that says notify employees, and then your employees would see a notification pop up in their own profile. So it makes it really easy for them to share it. They may not share everything. It may not be all completely relevant, but it's a great way to notify them. Of course, you have to have helped them set up their profiles and everything we've been talking about already. There is also a great feature for larger organizations that you can add your colleagues as teammates on LinkedIn. It's a newer feature, but you can actually, if you connect with them or you find them, you can recognize them as a colleague, which will actually prioritize their content in your newsfeed as well. Which means, like, even if you're not just sharing from the company page, if you see what a colleague has done, then you can support it and share it as well. One great way I found, as a quick side note, is actually within teams, make it a bit competitive. Kind of almost like, have you posted? Oh, no, I haven't. Have you posted? Yeah, and I got this many views and I got this lead. Compete, get people to kind of gamify it a little bit and compare what they're doing. And you'll have one person that literally is leading the pack, and then others that are kind of like, oh, okay, he's doing that. Maybe I should try it. So I've done everything from leaderboards to chocolate bars if you've done something, versus one organisation actually gave someone a half-day holiday for someone that actually did all their KPIs around engagement and content posting, which is great. I think it's really about this empowering and then giving them the tools. That's the main thing. Give them the tools from the company page and give them that guidance of what could you post yourself. We can share it as a resource if that works for you. I have a list of almost 15 kind of updates that work, which is questions around, have you launched something new in your business? Have you watched a TED talk that you particularly enjoyed? Have you got an event that you're going to? Almost just feed people ideas, and at some point it will just click, and it will just become as much of a habit of, you and I will probably no doubt even think about, just had great time recording a podcast. Yes. It just becomes second nature, that you don't think twice about kind of talking about it, but you just have to give people that kind of nudge and ideas to start with. And I think it just comes back to your word, is empowering people.
And as you say, once they start that first post and the outcome of it, and sometimes maybe first posts may not be the viral post that probably you see, but it's a start, and you tweak and you learn and you grow. And I think it's just wonderful. I mean, those are some great tips. I'm almost tempted to ask a sidebar question, but I had a discussion yesterday with someone who was talking about using AI, artificial intelligence, as a tool to generate content. Is that something that you recommend or have encountered as an enabler for folks who want to keep regular content feeds going out on LinkedIn?
There is tools available that can make things easier. I don't think we can get to the stage of AI being so good that it can completely replace your own voice and your own language and terminology that you would use. That's a real challenge. But when you know your topic, the kind of things that you want to share, you can absolutely kind of use tools that can help curate those, help you find things really easily on a day-to-day basis. I have alerts set up on certain keywords, on certain people, on certain topics, so that if that's the kind of thing that I'm going to share on my content, I don't have to do a big effort to go and look for it. So I think there's a certain element of machine learning and curation, but you absolutely have to put your own stamp on it with your own words, your own inputs, because otherwise it just sticks out like a mile. If we were having a conversation now and you said, Luan's nothing like her content, that's really weird, And you'd go, she's not who I thought she was. She doesn't even sound the tone of voice. I'm not sure that she's the person I want to do business with. So it's about putting your own stamp on things, because there's lots of people doing what we do. It's about people getting to know and want to work with us for the way that we are, whether the way that we work, the way that we sound, the way that we write. And I would hate for a machine to ever quite replicate people.
Luan, this discussion has been awesome. And I always like to end this segment of the conversation by asking you, you would have shared tons of great nuggets with us today. What would be the biggest takeaway you'd want our listeners to come away with?
Thank you. This has been great. It's always fun doing conversations. I think my biggest piece of advice is focus. Keep your focus. This is a business tool. Know why you want to use it. Know why you're on there, who you want to be talking to, and what your objectives are. And then you will find that you get results. If you don't focus, you scattergun approach, you'll just be wasting time. And then you'll tell someone like me that it doesn't work. Focus.
Thank you so much, Luan. That's wonderful. And I always like to end our discussions by asking our wonderful guests like you, who contribute so generously their time and expertise, how can we, the Internal Marketing Tribe, support you?
Oh, thank you. I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn or the other social media platforms. I do have a weekly newsletter where I send out updates on what I'm working on and what's going on in the world. Luckily, I have a unique name, so if you just search for my name, Luan Wise, you should be able to find my website and find me on the main social media platforms.
Absolutely. And we'll be sure to include those key links to that in the show notes, and how we can get subscribed to your newsletter. Yeah, I get it. And it's wonderful. So we'll include that in the show notes as well. Luan, thank you so very much.
And you, Kerry-Ann, thank you.
So join us next time and we'll continue to flip the marketing conversation right here on the Internal Marketing Podcast. The Internal Marketing Podcast is available on your favorite podcasting app.